Hello, and welcome to another episode of Marriage on a Tightrope. This is Allan.
And I'm Katie.
And we're still married.
And we're with another still married couple tonight.
What? We're very excited to have James and Denise, or Denise and James Stevenson, whichever you prefer. Thank you so much for joining us, and welcome to Marriage on a Tightrope.
Yeah, thanks.
This is exciting for a number of reasons, and nerve-wracking for a number of reasons. And I'll explain to everybody, especially the Stevensons, why. You may not know this. We've set up probably 6 different couples to interview, and this is the first one. This is the first time that we've made it work. So just with schedule, we were supposed to do one earlier this week, and it got rescheduled. We were supposed to do yours last week, and it got rescheduled. So thank you for working through technical issues before this. You're actually the ones recording the episode now, so you're already going above and beyond the call of duty here.
They're in it for the long haul.
Oh yeah.
Well, this episode is all about you guys, so we'd love to shut up and let you introduce yourselves. Already in just a couple of minutes of getting to know you before we started recording. Really excited for our listeners to hear another perspective of, doesn't matter what Katie and I can talk about, we don't have the perspective you do. So go ahead and introduce yourselves. We'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thanks.
So I'm Denise. I've known James since I was 15 or 16. So we've been together for a long time. We both grew up in Alaska. We both went to BYU, and we live in Seattle.
Nice.
Yeah, I like Seattle a lot. James works for Amazon. We have 2 kids, and mostly I play mommy, but I am also a clothing, fit, and construction teacher.
Whoa.
Wait, clothing, fit, and construction?
Like
a sewing teacher?
Yeah, I do the advanced sewing classes at the local fabric store.
Oh, man.
She also takes these commissions for these kind of cool cosplays and tries to take movie accurate replicas of things, and she's underselling how good she is at it. I think she's gone far beyond the typical crafting sewing into really loving garment construction and fit.
Nice.
Yeah.
I got to say, Denise, it was hard to compete with James works at Amazon, but you did it.
Thank you.
That's really cool.
I do really enjoy it. I like when it gets out of crafting and into engineering.
I need a Denise next door to me to help me with all of my kids' Halloween costumes, because
Halloween is my busy season.
I
was
bet
so
it is.
glad when we hit November 1st.
So how old are your kids?
They are 12 and 9.
Both boys.
2 boys.
Nice. See, if next time you're in Utah or we're in Seattle, we've got a 12 and 10-year-old. We got to hang out.
Yeah,
That
definitely.
would be awesome.
So what else would you like to know, just prior to doing kind of the timeline of who you guys are from a marriage/faith perspective? What else should we know about you? Who is this? Who are Stevensons?
So I mean, we've always been really close, and I think growing up in Alaska, you have kind of an interesting perspective on things. You can just kind of slow down and appreciate life, appreciate the people around you.
Else to do.
That's a major thing there. So I grew up in really a log cabin. We didn't have running water for quite a while, and so over that few decades to get to doing AI research and things at Amazon, I think I've seen a lot of different varieties of lifestyle. And then I was a convert as well, so I've experienced life before the church and in the church, and then also outside of the church. So I think my life has a lot of variety in it.
Yeah.
Generally a pretty creative person. I like to cook or do photography or play trumpet, and kind of blend the analytical and the creative together, just as much as Denise's fabric construction builds things, but also enjoys the engineering behind it. So I think we're well suited together, and we've been that way for 20 years.
Great.
And I'm a military brat, so I've been all over, and between the 2 of us, we've done a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
So military brat. So did you live all over the place? Obviously, you mentioned Alaska, but were you moving around a lot when you were?
Oh yeah, I was born in Vegas, and then we moved to Alaska, and then we moved to Japan, and then we moved to Arizona, and then we moved from Arizona back to Alaska in the dead of winter. That was interesting.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah. And then after I went to BYU, my parents got stationed in Mississippi and then outside of Ogden, and then that's where they retired.
They're retired now, and the two of you said met at BYU, right?
No,
No,
we met in high school. Yeah.
Oh,
High
that's
school,
right.
yeah,
Okay, you
early
met
on.
in high school. You said 15 or 16, and then take us from there. You're
Yeah.
going through BYU. How did you get together?
So I guess we can start being 15.
We never got untogether, really.
We never really
Wow.
did. So yeah, we met in high school in
Because
band.
I bashed
Actually,
him upside the head in band.
yeah. So we were first introduced because she had some gripes about how fast I was leading the section, and playfully
He was doing it wrong.
She thought I was doing it wrong. So playfully kind of whacked me upside the head with a drum mallet, which looks very furry, but actually has a nice hard core inside of it.
Yeah, I would like it to be noted that I did not know it had a steel core. I thought
she
it was
thought it was
all
perfectly
the way
nice. But so yeah, so that was our introduction. But
It's like a rom-com
Sounds so
beginning.
bad.
it is, right? It's pretty bad. Yeah, but we had some classes together. We had a chemistry class together. Again, you want to talk the rom-com, right?
All cliches.
At that time, I wasn't a member of the church. I mentioned, being curious and having a variety of hobbies. So I was actually the one who asked her for a copy of the Book of Mormon because I thought, oh well, this is an interesting thing. It's important to her, so I might as well just see what it is. So I read that and was like, oh cool, this is all awesome and it's great, and I feel the Spirit and I want to get baptized. And my parents were a little weirded out, to say the least.
I was going to say they were a
lot weirded out. And so they had me wait another year, and I breezed through the missionary discussions and just kind of waited out the year, and then got baptized in the middle of the Chena River, which was somewhere, I don't know.
It's like 32 degrees in
I don't
the
know.
summer.
Yeah, I don't know how cold. It's cold.
You're a pioneer.
Yeah, a pioneer, right? With your log cabin and rivers, getting baptized, right? So went off and did a year and a half at BYU, and then took pretty much my entire life savings and threw it out of mission. Went to Denver South. We got back. We actually got married fairly shortly after that.
We got married 4 months to the day after
4 months,
we got
right?
home.
But I guess at that point we'd known each other for quite a while. I got a job offer from IBM, and so I interned at IBM for 4 years while I was finishing my degree and doing my master's. And so at that point we're gonna have to be moving over the summer, and so we were like, oh well, it's gonna be sad. I just got back from a mission. We're gonna be gone again for another few months, and I don't know who it was. Maybe one of our parents had said, well, you guys are gonna end up married anyway. Why don't you just get married? And so we actually said, that probably makes sense, and we did.
We pulled together a wedding in 6 weeks.
Yeah.
It was nuts.
Wow.
So I mean, really, go ahead.
So what year was that?
2004.
2004. Okay.
That's when we got married.
That's when we got married.
Oh,
There you go.
I'm just trying to gauge,
Yeah.
I'm 37.
Okay, you and I are the same age.
James, are you 36?
Yeah, I am.
Yeah.
I just my birthday was
Look at
Halloween,
that.
so I had to actually think about that because it just
Twin
changed
couples.
over.
Twin couples.
Perfect. Then I guess as I finished up school, got a job at Amazon, moved to Seattle about 10 years ago. That takes us through kind of the early part of our life. But yeah, I think
You're not missing much.
that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I just want to go back. I did have a question, James, about your family. What was their reaction? Did you grow up in a religious home?
No.
Or did you already have a belief in God? Like, what did it mean for you to join the church?
So, I mean, my mother was raised Catholic, and my dad was a spiritual in nature kind of way. I think a lot of Alaskans are, and the independent, I don't need an organized religion. I do my own thing, and I'm nice to people, and that's what counts. So, no, I wasn't raised in a religious home. And in fact, I think really between like the Book of Mormon and talking with Denise and some other Christian friends that I had, this idea of feeling this kind of thing, which the church calls the Spirit, was a really new emotion to me. It was something that I wasn't prepared to understand or process very well. And I think my parents weren't either. They thought it was kind of weird. This like we can't really relate to what you say that you're feeling. So they definitely wanted me to kind of slow down a little bit. Eventually, going on a mission was definitely hard for them, not being able to talk to me. I know there was a point when my mom tried to get me tickets to go see the Nutcracker. She was like, the church is super conservative. You have to listen to classical music, so you should be able to go see the Nutcracker. And she called up the mission president and said, like, hey, I wanted my son to go to the Nutcracker. And he's like, no, it's out of his zone boundaries. And she was just crushed. And then we got
Poor
back
mama.
and got married, and then they couldn't come to the temple, obviously, and so they couldn't see us get married, and so they were crushed again. So they had
And
quite a few
were they
years.
silently crushed, or did they talk to you about it?
No.
No, they weren't.
were
I mean, honestly, I think they were remarkably patient in retrospect. Now that I'm a parent,
Oh yeah, they were super patient, but not,
not
silent.
silent. Yeah.
Very patient, but you knew that it was a problem.
Oh yeah, for sure. But I mean, I was also very, 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 very much fully in. I mean, there was a point in my senior year where I was questioning whether my parents should buy Grey Poupon mustard because it had white wine in it, and I was like, but this might be against the word of wisdom, guys. And they were just like, oh, shut up, oh, please.
Oh my gosh.
Uh,
Oh my gosh, the Grey Poupon.
I mean, but I was, I was very new to it and very much fully on board. I'd heard all the talks of, being, that kind of fully committed attitude, mighty change of heart, Alma the Younger, kind of like, you go at it, you obey with exactness. I was all in for sure.
Yeah, you were good
Well,
at it.
I think that's very admirable because I think it says a lot about your character. I mean, it doesn't matter where you're at now, but I think it is important that once you commit, you commit. And so good for you.
Yes, but my poor parents for sure. They they were as patient as they could be, but it was hard on them.
Yeah, of course.
So Denise, walk us through up to when you got married and through the early stages of the marriage.
Well, I was born in the church. Like, Brigham Young is my 6th great uncle, I think. Lorenzo Snow is in there. Like, there's like 3 or 4 prophets in my genealogy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I was very overtly Mormon for you to be asking me for a Book of Mormon. Yeah, I was all in. It was one of the very few constants that I had in my life because we were moving around all the time. So yeah, I was like super involved, super active, Laurel president, seminary president, all that.
Can I ask, when you're moving around, are you going to, I mean, from place to place, you're finding the new ward or branch, and did you find, you mentioned that was kind of a constant for you. Were there things that were different from going from Japan to Arizona to Alaska? Were there differences that, not necessarily bad differences, but differences that that were noticeable?
Yes and no. The nice thing about the military is that after a while you start to know people. So, like, I had a guy who went to my high school that I had known when I was 7 in Japan. And so the military culture tends to stay pretty constant, but then each place you're in has its own flavor, especially a place like Japan. And we had Japanese members in our branch and military people in our branch. Some wards were a lot closer than other wards. And I mean, Alaska is a place all on its own. It's got a very, very definite character to it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, each ward was different. But it was relaxing to know, like, I always knew what the next lesson was going to be.
Right.
Like, we leave Arizona, and I know what the primary class is going to be when we get up to Alaska.
Right. So it's constant, something that you're familiar
nice.
with. That's good.
Yeah.
So now you're at BYU.
Now I'm at BYU, and I was actually really, really sick most of the time I was at BYU. I had to have my face reconstructed my freshman year. And it took me...
tell us about that. What happened?
What happened was military medicine was not what it is. And nobody realized that I had problems with my jaws that weren't cosmetic until it was too late. And nobody in Alaska knew how to fix it. So my jaws didn't grow from the time I was 9 or 10. So the top half of my face was like adult size, and the bottom half of my face is small child size. Yeah, we got down to Utah, and they knew how to fix it there. So I had a bunch of teeth removed, and I had surgery, and had to have my top jaw broken. And it was all kinds of fun. It's just what you want your freshman year of college.
It was great for dating.
Oh,
right?
yeah, of course.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I couldn't say my name. I couldn't say T or D, and I lived in 210 T Hall DT.
Oh. Gosh.
Nobody knew where I lived, and I answered to Jenny for a year because that was as close as I could get to say my name.
And meanwhile,
Oh.
I was the new convert.
And you were the new convert. So here's me looking crazy. I was not in a good spot for a lot of my freshman year. And there's James, the shiny new convert, and like every single woman in his ward wanted to date him.
At first, until the RMs got back. The RMs got back and it was changed.
Right.
Yeah, but
yeah.
But
That's the nature of BYU. You just want to date anyone around you.
Yeah, but it was like especially shiny. Yeah, freshman.
I can mold him.
Yeah. Well, we have in our relationship history, we have a day. I guess we refer to as change of policy day because she was going through a rough time and I knew it, and I didn't want to pry and step on things, and I was enjoying, all the kind of date a bunch of people and see
you were
things.
Enjoying your harem.
No, I have much more respect than to use that word to describe any of the lovely women at BYU. But I think at somewhere it was really towards the end of the year, just kind of decided that you were such a constant companion for me that you were where I wanted to spend my life with, not in the marriage sense, but just to be around. The thing that you knew where I'd been, you knew about me, and so I think there was someday in the spring it just came
April.
up. It was April.
It was like April 3rd. I remember.
Yeah, April 3rd. You remember? Yeah. I don't know exactly what I did, but just kind of just grabbed you.
Wouldn't leave me alone.
It was
like
awesome. Hey. And so I think that's probably when our dating got serious. Before then, we were always kind of like everyone knew we were serious, but we didn't want to admit it because that was against like
the rules.
You weren't supposed to date steady, right? Especially before you go on a mission and get attached and everything. So we tried. And even before I left, I maintained the self-illusion that we were not that much together. But we really were.
We totally were.
You can't see us right now, but while you're talking, Allan and I have our like bottom lip puckered and we're like puppy dog eyes at each other because it just is so sweet to hear. I just love that.
The rom-com moved from drum hitting in the head to the cute. I have to be around this person moment.
Yeah. It was. And then came the mission.
Yeah. So he went on his mission. That was sophomore year? Yeah, the middle of sophomore year.
Yeah.
So after I got my face reconstructed, it took me a long time to learn to eat again. And starving for a few months kind of wrecks your body, and I was really, really sick. So I never went on a mission or anything because I couldn't do it. So yeah, I was at BYU for a couple of years, and I went on the odd date, but none of them were as good as James. So
no close calls, huh?
No, there were no close calls. It's like, no, you were all markedly inferior.
I love it. You guys are ferociously in love. It's great.
That's right.
Kind of are. I hadn't thought of it that way, but that is true.
It's probably true.
That's good.
So I got my degree in linguistics and taught ESL for a while after I graduated, and while James was working on his master's. Then I got pregnant with our first and was so ridiculously sick that I was like, I never want to work again.
Yeah.
And so I was mommy for quite a while until they got old enough for me to start teaching.
Let's just skip ahead a little bit to where the faith crisis started and who did it start with, about what year, or how long has it been?
Well, so I mean it's an interesting question because I don't know that a faith crisis starts instantly for everybody. Some people they do. They stumble across something. For me, it was probably a much longer slide, and it probably started in my first area on my mission. Really, and my trainer was a very, very interesting character. Really believed and thought that he had a great understanding of what would make a great missionary, and that he had a lot of nuance and things. I think his father was a professor of religion at BYU Idaho and things, and he still. But on the other hand, he also didn't quite stick to some of the peculiars of getting up at 6:30 or getting out the door, and he would sometimes sleep in. But I think
it turned him into a spectacularly abusive man.
Yeah, the challenge for me there was that I was coming on there with that very naive new missionary thing, and I didn't expect everyone to be perfect, but I also didn't expect to be kind of berated on a fairly regular basis by my senior companion for things like how you're knocking on the door, was it, or like, and he would just go, kind of chew into me like, Elder, you can't do that. People won't come to the door. You have to be this way, and
we all recognize that the second one was the correct knock.
Exactly right. And things like companionship study that would, or we're supposed to talk about our issues, and he would just lay into me for like 20, 30 minutes, and then say, and would not let me speak, and then say, hey, okay, I know that has to be fair. It's your turn, and then I'd have to say, well, I understand where you're coming from. I would start to talk, and about a minute later, I realized he was asleep and snoring. And so it was 3 months of that, and just constant, you're doing this wrong, you need to do this. But I really love serving with you, Elder. It's great. I think he said it was like a marriage. He was the husband. I needed to follow his righteous lead. And if I did, everything would be great.
Which is a great setup for marriage, right?
Right. And so at the end of that, I walked away from it feeling just really, 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 really beat down. And I knew all the promises of you'll zone conferences, everything will be great. You'll baptize people if you're just more obedient. And I was like I said, I was avoiding Grey Poupon mustard. I had the exact obedience down to a science, and of course those promises of that were nothing in the face of more popular missionaries who were considerably less obedient. And so it was a weird 3 months for me. And my next companion was just surprised when I would knock on a door and ask, "Was that one okay?" He was like, "Dude, chill." The reason I point to that as kind of a start of a faith crisis is because there was a something to get through that had to change inside me, to start to understand that more than just following and just I had to have a different kind of inner spiritual strength, right? It took a certain kind to buck the trend and go against my parents' wishes and get baptized, but you still had the support of the prophets and the apostles and everything. And feeling very much alone, my spirituality had to be something that I completely took ownership over. It couldn't be any more just you're part of this great effort, and that's all it is. There had to be something deeper. And so I came back a little bit wary, a little bit cautious of authority, a little bit compassionate in a different way.
Yeah, it was like when he came back, I knew something had gone wrong. But he was, because we wrote each other back and forth the whole time he was on his mission. And so I knew something had gone wrong, but I didn't know how badly wrong it had gone until I tried to ask him about his mission. And it was like I had never said anything. And he never ignores me. Like, he might be like, "I'm busy, I can't talk right now," because he gets really focused. But he never ignores me. And it was like I hadn't said anything. And so I would try to be like, I was like, maybe you didn't hear me. And I'd be like, "Hey, what about this?" And it still shot right through his head. He literally could not talk about it. It was crazy.
So I think coming out of that, in some ways that the church talks about, these kind of dark moments and these personal Gethsemanes and things. And I don't need to get into the details. I know, again, people have far crazier things happen to them on their mission.
Sure.
But something started to click, that faith in God for me was more than just following rules. Faith in God involved a passionate tenacity that if God was there, you had to keep doing the right thing, even if everyone else around you was a jerk, even if everyone else around you was wrong, even if the authority structures you trusted in failed and your parents were mad at you because you were getting married in the temple. And I mean, when all of that doesn't quite work out the way it's supposed to, you do the right thing, and you don't let go. And you don't give up, and you don't give up on your belief in doing what's right, and just kind of go along with the crowd. And it's maybe one of those moments that's kind of hard to explain, unless you've kind of experienced something kind of like that. But I had some mission companions that were great. One of my favorite ones was Elder Duff. He was a convert as well, and we would sit and we would discuss the interesting things that we saw. We would discuss the curious cases of the children who were 2 getting up and saying, I want to bear my testimony. I know the church is true. I know my family loves me, and I love them too. And it was a sing-song rhyme that they had. And we, as missionaries, we got to move around in Colorado, and we'd see these rhymes spread culturally, right? And we'd say, is this really God telling a 2-year-old that the church is true or not? Or are they just literally repeating what they heard? And is it weird that we make kids do that? And we would discuss being gay, and is that biological? Is that something they can just change? And we would have heated debates about it. He was a great companion. Later on, he left the church before I did. So there were moments of really good things in there as well, but also some places that really apparently were more painful than I realized.
Yeah.
And I think it was hard for Denise to see when she came back.
Yeah. So a lot of the seeds planted on the mission. Take a few minutes and get us to critical mass. What brought it up to that point?
So 10 more years almost go by, right?
Yeah,
about 10 years.
So this would be like 6 years ago.
And throughout all that time, I spent a lot of time kind of tampering down on just read the scriptures, just go to the temple or just focus on the basics. And there was a point when questions and concerns that I had, things that bothered me, the things that I wanted to discuss in Sunday school. I wanted to discuss the 2-year-olds and the testimony. Like, is that really a testimony? I want to discuss, how you really differentiate the theoretical God answering a prayer and you just kind of casually observing something that really wasn't related at all, because clearly other people in other religions did it. I wanted to discuss the meaty and the weightier aspects of the gospel, not the deep doctrine, not the obscure stuff, but what it really means to have a testimony and to know what really happens, what's just kind of our emotions and what's really actually God.
Did you try to bring that stuff up?
Oh, well, sure, but I mean that's not how Sunday school goes.
Oh, I know. I guess like was the reaction that you got when you tried to bring up some of those things part of the crisis for you?
Well, no, I think part of the crisis was just tampering down on that natural tenacity and the creativity and that desire for truth, the thing that led me to the church. And to say, no, just go back to just focus on these things. Just go back to do this. Just go back to, the church is true. The Book of Mormon is true. Joseph Smith's a prophet, and kind of those surface level things. But I think inside part of that was there were questions. There were things that I needed to discuss, places spiritually I needed to go. And I was trying to follow the counsel to say, don't go there. Don't just stay kind of there. And I think, some of that might have been changing. And I know that theoretically the church wants you to build your own deeper testimony, but I think the way you approach those questions it is not always received with a lot of understanding. And
right.
So Denise noticed that, and she noticed that I was just not thriving. And then she put together these things of like, I've seen you with your testimony on fire, and I've seen you with it beat down after a mission, and what do we need to do to help you really rekindle that? And we discussed things, and she said, go read books by general authorities. Go let yourself be curious and learn. Sunday school isn't the right place for that. Of course not. You're not going to get it there. Why would you entirely expect that? But that doesn't need to stop your spiritual growth. And I was like, okay, let's do it. And so I picked up Rough Stone Rolling.
Denise, did you recommend anything to him, or
did you have any reservations in I know you're making the suggestion, but like, what are you thinking while this is happening?
Well, I was thinking that clearly something was wrong. Like, we would come back from church every Sunday and he looked miserable. And after you've known James for any length of time, like, that look, and it's when he's supremely frustrated. It's not a boredom thing. It's not I'm just in a bad mood thing. It's like extreme frustration. He's one of the most even-keeled people I know. And so if he's upset enough to look like that, something's actually wrong. And so I just kind of sat him on the couch one Sunday night, and I was like, what is wrong? Because I couldn't figure it out. And he starts bubbling up with all of these doctrinal questions, like, how do you know when something is actually an answer to prayer? How are you supposed to tell on the important things if it's the Spirit or if it's just you? And what do you do, like on the mission, when they promise you baptisms if you're obedient, and that doesn't happen?
And everyone knows that, of course, it doesn't happen, but they say it anyway.
Well, and they promise you in the name of God. That should carry some weight. And so he starts bobbling with all of these questions.
I mean, probably we're talking like 10 years, 12 years worth of things that I've been like, no, just keep it, just focus. Just focus, just read the scriptures, just say your prayers, just focus.
It all comes out this one night.
Yeah,
and
one night.
Denise, does this like freak you out?
What percentage? If there's a scale of concern,
don't worry, we'll get to freak out later. This is still.
This is not freak out stuff.
This is not the freak out.
Okay, yeah, you can let us know later when the freak out happens.
We'll get there.
So my reaction was, if you stop James from trying to learn, you'll either get steamrolled or you'll get a very sad James. And I didn't want either of those things. My first reaction was, you're not going to find things that are going to tell you that the church isn't true, because it is. So go forth, read Stone Rolling. I think I suggested Rough Stone. Yeah, because Rob read it.
Yeah, Rough Stone. But you also suggested, like books that like Eyring had written, or Maxwell, right?
Yeah. Go and find commentary. Find something. Did you guys ever see Short Circuit?
Yes.
Oh yeah, Johnny Five.
James is like the robot from Short Circuit. You have to give him more input.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, go find input, because I trusted him to not go on.
Well, the church is true.
Yeah, the church is true, and I trusted you not to go on some like raving anti-Mormon site, which you.
I don't even think we even considered that.
No. So I was like, yeah, go, and you'll be fine, and you'll be happier. And
okay, so James, she gives you permission basically, and not that you need it, but she's like, go search out and go study and go find. And so obviously you go to do that. And my question is she along for the ride while you are doing that? When you learn something, are you coming to her and talking to her about it, or are you keeping it to yourself?
So this is the interesting thing. Kind of.
Not for. It was a while.
Well, at first because there's nothing to bring her along for, and then when there is, it's clearly something I didn't understand or have context on, and then when I realized the gravity of what I understood, it was too late. So it wasn't so much that I didn't want to take her along. It was just that there was no need. It was like, okay, I could share everything that I'm reading, and I share everything that I would occasionally mention something like, wow, this is kind of interesting. She's like, huh, okay.
To use a very Alaskan metaphor, it was very like an avalanche. It's just a few snowflakes. You see snowflakes all the time, no big deal. And a little bit of snow rolled down the hill next to me, still not a big deal. And before you know it, the whole mountainside is sliding down, and you're doomed.
So I think it really took me about, 9 months or so of just kind of stuff, and things that just kind of went down the rabbit hole more of like, I want to be sensitive to the listeners and everything like that.
Thank you.
For sure. But I think it's probably safe enough to say that there are aspects of church doctrine and history that have not been taught factually accurately, and regardless of how long it takes the church to kind of to catch up to that, there are aspects of things that are not as simply the way that they were presented, right? Certainly not to me as a convert in the middle of Alaska with no access to BYU vaults and archives and those kinds of things. And I came to the conclusion at one point, I think probably after 9 months of research, that there were things that the prophets had done that I considered not just a mistake, because I would never expected perfection out of the prophets, but actually significantly immoral. And in coming to those conclusions, I didn't do so lightly. I would read journal articles and psychology journals, and I looked around for every way of disconfirming this sinking feeling I had that some things were actually very wrong. And I think there was 1 week where I eventually told Denise, I'm like, this is actually just wrong. I really, really think this is wrong.
That was the freak out.
There was the freak out. And then we had a very interesting summer where I still tried to stay in. I tried to find a way of making it work.
What summer is this?
Is this 2014 or something?
No, because it was
2013?
Like 2013.
2013, right?
Yeah.
And interrupt me. I'm telling this from my perspective of things.
So that was it was in April.
Yeah.
When you came to me, you were just like, I just cannot do this anymore.
I didn't quite say it like that though, right?
Because you didn't say it like that.
There were some things that were wrong.
Yeah.
But I didn't say I can't do this anymore.
No, you did say, what would you do if I didn't think the Book of Mormon was true anymore? And now I'm wigging out. It was like a month later where you're like, yeah, I don't think this is true. To me, it felt like the world had flipped upside down and nobody had noticed except for me. Everybody's still, going about their business and walking on the ceiling and not at all worried about the fact that all the dishes are on the ceiling and broken, and the
world flipped literally upside down to you.
Yeah, well, because that was reality. You get married in the temple, and you have kids, and you raise them, and they go off to BYU and temple marriages, and then we go be mission presidents or something. That was reality. And then it just did not exist anymore. And I know you well enough to know that there was no way that you did it for a stupid reason, that you hadn't done the research, that you hadn't tried everything you could think of to make this okay. And so I knew there was no talking you out of it. Not that I would have tried to talk you out of it, but I knew there were the chances of me finding a place where you had gone wrong, where I could show you, no, you made a mistake. Here's where it is, and here's what you should have done. So let's just fix that. I knew that the odds of finding a spot like that were very, very small.
So Denise, if I can play on that just for a second, was there any part of that process that you felt at fault for?
I can't tell you how many times I have kicked myself for saying, just go read whatever you want. You're not going to find something that's going to tell you the church isn't true.
Yeah, that turned out to not be.
Yeah.
So, but for a while, you kicked yourself over that.
Oh, I kicked myself over that for years. It was, because there was that first year where you were kind of doing all the research, and you were very quiet. And so I was like, yeah, everything's fine.
And every time I found something, I was like, no, this is okay. We'll figure it out. And so there wasn't any.
To make it fine.
There wasn't any reason to kind of say anything. And that's kind of one of our biggest regrets, is not saying something early. And it probably I didn't, because I still trusted and believed that there was no actual problems. I guess it would be like if you're swimming at the local swimming pool and you have such utter confidence that there are no sharks in that pool, that when you see a fin, you say, it doesn't really matter how realistic that fin is, it's not a real shark, until you feel like there's blood in the water and it's all of a sudden this is not what I thought it was. I think that's what being in a marriage going through a faith crisis is like. You're not necessarily trying to hide anything, or at least I wasn't.
No, you were just trying to find a way to make it okay.
Because I trusted that everything was the way it really was, and I was just missing something, until I realized that I wasn't.
So yeah, I spent a lot of time kicking myself. I spent a lot of time being like, we should have done FHE more. We should have been better about scripture study. I should have been better about all of those things.
James, let's do this. You mentioned that you tried to make it work for a while.
Sure.
Spend just a half a minute talking about why it didn't.
Yeah. So
why it didn't work, and then the moment that you say you're done, and what that looked like for the marriage.
That's the next 4 months or so from April. 6 months. During that time, I baptized my son and felt kind of sick afterwards doing that. I read things or listened to DeLynne's interview on Mormon Stories with the Givenses, and introduced myself a little bit to kind of an apologetic way of looking at things. But I woke up a few nights just in tears, thinking through all the stories I'd heard about people who had died, and how wonderful it was, and how the Mormon funerals, the LDS funerals, are so happy because we know about the plan of salvation, and then contrasting that to all the lessons I heard about how unhappy and how sad and how horrible it was when people would leave, and parts of me feeling like that, you know, if I were to just walk out in the middle of the night and just go for a walk, nobody would have to know what I'm doing. I could just walk and then casually step into the street as a truck is coming by. Everyone could have a nice, happy funeral, because that's what Mormon funerals are. That's what LDS funerals have, right? Everyone would be happy, and then would say, if they knew that I was going through this faith crisis, they would say, man, isn't it such a wonderful blessing that Heavenly Father took him back, you know, before he could be led astray. And that state, ironically, there was a part of me that didn't want to do that, but also almost felt like, but, you know, it wasn't tempting, but it was. And so I would lay there and cry for hours, wondering if, even though I knew none of my friends and family would ever want me to do that, but if I did, if it wouldn't actually be better for them. And I read, I tried to see if I can make an apologetic kind of view work, and I even hit a point where I realized that all of this creativity, all of this stuff that I had, I actually, and this was the really scary part, as I could do it. I had to take this part of myself that just was relentlessly honest, and I had to kill it. If I did that, if I really, really embraced that and said, I don't know, I just don't understand, everything's too complicated, or I understood then enough about how some people think to say I could reason my way through this, call it the Spirit, and people would say that it's a great gospel scholar, right? Because these are kind of the deep doctrine things you hear. I could be one of those people. I could be that, but I wouldn't be me.
Right.
I would lie to myself, and after, you know, the thoughts of physically ending who I was, the thoughts of now you could spiritually end who you are, that kind of honest part of you, just rip it out, get rid of it. Whoso loses their life for the gospel, right? Lose it and find yourself. It was tempting to do that.
And he sat me down one night and told me all of this, because you hadn't mentioned any of that before.
Yeah.
Where, you know, he was just like, I could just step in front of a car, and wouldn't everybody actually be happier? No, we wouldn't be. And then him saying, you know, I could change myself into this, and here's how I could do it, and it would be easier. And wouldn't that be better? That part of James that is so driven to be the best that he knows how to be, that is so stinking full of integrity you couldn't bend him if you tried, and to have him say, I could just end that. I could be
that mission president.
Yeah, you could be the mission president. Because I always wanted to go on a mission, and I couldn't do it.
Not that I would aspire for that, but that life,
Yeah,
they go to the temple and,
yeah,
you know.
That whole life, and you're like holding it there in front of me. And we were sitting in the office. We were sitting in this room.
This very room, yeah.
And, you know, he's just got it in his hands in front of me. And he's like, I could do this for you. And he meant it. Like, he totally meant it. And all it would have cost would have been that part of James. And I couldn't do it. I was just like, no, that's like the one thing I never would have forgiven you for. Would have been ending that part of you.
And I think, and at that moment, that was when I decided that I would keep going to church, but I would stop paying tithing, and I would respectfully turn down callings, and it was something that took a different kind of faith, because I had to say now, not knowing that God was real, but if he was, that being honest would count, that I made a choice somewhere along the way to not throw that away. And if I was absolutely wrong about anything, then having faith that he would be able to correct me, but that at least I would be able to say I did that, and I did it for my kids. I didn't lie when it was tempting. I didn't bury what I thought I understood. I didn't hide those talents under a bushel because I was afraid. I did it. And that required a different kind of faith, to step away from what you had thought you knew was true, what you kept your parents out of your wedding for and gave up your life savings for, and to take that and say, I understand why I did that all, but I have to be still honest now, and I have to keep that part of me alive. Maybe even not for my own sake, but my kids deserve it. My kids deserve a dad. My kids deserve a dad who doesn't lobotomize a part of himself. And then to hope that if there was a God, if I was wrong, that he would understand. That's a scary kind of faith.
So we're both like tearing up right here because you touched on a few things that are just like so deeply personal. So thank you for sharing those, because I think, and Allan and I have only experienced it because people reach out to us and they have these feelings of, it would just be better if I were gone. And you would never want anyone to act upon those things. And then also the sacrifice, I think, that you are willing to make for your marriage and for each other, it goes both ways, James on your side and Denise as well as on yours. And so, like, I just feel so good about what you just said to us. Thank you very much for being so vulnerable.
You're welcome.
It's hard to want to say anything because you guys are both so well spoken.
Yes.
Thank you.
Don't want to interrupt the beauty that's happening. Denise, I love what you said, that you couldn't let him continue, and you haven't gotten to the next step of the journey, right? But you couldn't let that part of himself die, that integrity part. I think it really shows that there was, from even in the hardest moments when he's saying these things, it could be so hard to hear that you both had each other's best interests at the surface.
He's my best friend. He always has been. There was no choice there. There was nothing else I ever would have done.
Right.
But I think there's still an ironic Garden of Eden personal story in there too, of kind of looking at each other and saying, this is not what we thought. One of us has eaten of a tree. and now what do we do?
No, that's a really good analogy and a great transition, because Denise, talk us through now, stepping out into the wilderness with James and what that was like, and what took you from that moment of that harrowing talk that you had to your decision to leave the church.
So I was in for 2.5 years after James left. I had every intention of remaining that way.
Yeah.
So
we were also terrified at this point.
Oh yeah, I was scared to death. Yeah, I have OCD. And so, anybody would be scared. Anybody would be scared, but I could not turn it off. And so I think it took me the better part of a year to stop freaking out all the time. I learned to hold it together so I wasn't terrifying the kids. And life has to happen. Life still has to happen. So
you were never terrifying the kids.
I felt like I was going to at like any moment.
No, you were fine. You were awesome.
Yeah, it took me a long time to stop wigging out. And I was praying like constantly. I was like, you just need to fix this. I like talking to God, not to James. I knew James had done the best he knew how to do. And so there's me praying and be like, you need to fix this. I have done everything I can think of. James is a good man, and I absolutely refuse to give up on this. I don't care what anybody says, and if they tell me otherwise, I'm going to walk up to this bishop and tell him to jump off a cliff. You will fix this.
I think the ward was mostly okay.
No, the ward was not okay. They were just absolutely silent. People, so it was either that James had never existed and nobody mentioned him ever, or there was one guy who would like stalk me down the halls. He was the elders quorum president, and like, what can we do to get James back? I'm like, dude, if I knew, I would have already done it. Leave me alone.
But I mean, I have to say, on that point, there were a couple of people, that elders quorum president, and a member of the high priest group that somebody else in the elders quorum presidency too. I mean, they were legitimately listening. They were able to listen to what I had to say. And I think they were never unkind to me. I think they were actually. I remember saying one time that I was still going to church with you at this time. That they were excellent examples of what to do when somebody has a faith crisis, because they didn't approach me as though I did something wrong.
No, they were great. They just drove me absolutely
Well, they were
insane
worried.
to church. They were. I was worried, and I just wanted to go to church and not worry, and so that wasn't happening. But it took me the better part of a year to kind of pull myself back together. Then I felt like I was just in this holding pattern of waiting until it was fixed. It was kind of like life will really get going again when this is fixed. And that's not a good place to be. Nobody should live there.
It's normal to be there.
Yeah, it's normal to be there, but it's a bad place to live. It's
very
a
hard.
crummy neighborhood. I remember I was doing laundry one day, and I was putting clothes away up in our room, trying to think through things and be like, how long is this going to take? How long am I going to have to stay in this spot where I'm worried all the time, where I don't know how to talk to James about so many things? And I mean, we've been best friends since I was 16. There's never been anything that we couldn't talk about. And all of a sudden there's like this huge thing that we can't talk about. Because I couldn't talk about it without, like, I just break down hysterically crying. I couldn't handle it. And so I'm sitting there putting laundry away. Was it 2 Nephi 2:25, it's Adam fell that men might be, and men are that they might have joy. And it occurred to me that should apply to me too. That living in limbo like I was is not any sort of way to have joy. That's not how any loving God would want me to live. When I had an amazing husband, I have great kids, I don't want for a single thing in this world. And I was just sitting in it. I wasn't living in it. I had this fabulous life all laid in front of me, and I was just sitting there looking at it instead of doing it. And that seemed all of a sudden very wrong. I put everything down, and I just sat down for a second, and it's like, okay, then I'm going to stop fretting, and I'm just going to go. I'm going to go, and we're going to do life. And, James is going to get home tonight. I'm going to make him this fantastic dinner, and I'm starting over right here because I'm tired. I can't do this anymore, and I don't think it's right. Yeah, you got home that night, and I, knocked you over as soon as you walked in the door. I was like, hi, I'm so glad to see you, and, dinner and all this stuff. And it got easier. It didn't get easy, but it was a lot easier from there. And it was starting to get, I would still massively overreact when he would try and bring stuff up. Because, I've been his best friend since we were kids. And so it's really hard on him not being able to talk to me because he was just trying not to hurt me. And it's a terrible place to put somebody where it's like there's this thing that's super important to me and you're my whole world, but you won't talk to me about this. That was terrible. I'm sorry, love.
Well, I think probably because it was even as I go through all of this, actually hearing all the details was not something you were particularly interested in. And especially after I had made the decision that I'm kind of done, it was doubly so because knowing those details could be terrifying. From my perspective, I wanted to share and I wanted to be open and I wanted to talk. And I had a wife who majored and had a degree in linguistics. To have a degree in linguistics and to love words since she was a little girl, but not be willing to talk about what the word translation means or Egyptian scrolls, to me it felt like something. It wasn't right. To have these gifts and have communication, but then to have these subjects that were just completely off limits. It was hard, and so I felt distant, and I think one of the things, maybe I'm reading into it, remembering it wrong, but leading into that was that I think I started to disengage a bit.
Yeah.
Because I started to realize that, if this is the new normal, if we can't talk about these important subjects, then I'm still extremely committed to Denise. But there's really nothing I'm doing that's going to change this. I've tried to say things. This is just the way things are going to be. And so I would kind of, I was not unaffectionate or anything, but there was a part of me that was, I think...
You weren't all there.
There was a part of me that just kind of was like, okay, I guess this part of me is never going to be something that I can share with anybody. It's going to be alone. And it has to be alone, and I don't know any other choice to do this, but it's going to be alone. And even my wife can't share it with me. And I guess, but a few months after I made that and I started to kind of disengage, I noticed that she was starting to change her spirituality, and she was starting to embrace more than just the gospel letter, but kind of the spirit of things. We would go to Sunday school, and we would read like LDS commentary about the lesson that goes a little bit deeper, and I could see that she was embracing more than just the obey side that I had been as a missionary, and I realized that, if as long as she was able to claim her own spirituality and she wasn't just doing it out of obedience, then maybe it was okay. At one point, I think somebody had stopped her in the hall and asked her if she was, or the bishop asked her, are you worried about your eternal marriage? And she said, no, he's doing everything he can that's right, and when he's wrong, God will show him it, but right now I'm not worried.
It's the only time in my life I've ever talked back to a bishop.
And I think her doing that and telling me about it gave me this confidence that she wasn't only obeying, that she really had internalized that this was her marriage. It wasn't just it wasn't just a marriage from a celestial kingdom, celestial marriage part. It was hers, and the spirituality wasn't just hers because she was Mormon, had a testimony. It was hers, and hers legitimate desire to draw closer to God. And I realized I would support her with that, and I think that was an important turning part for our marriage.
Yeah.
Even if it also made me disengage a little bit, because at least I wasn't angry at her.
I was trying to figure out a way to make things work in my head. I'm a very logical person by nature. I was seeing things like, like Sunday school, when you're doing the Book of Mormon and you get to the middle of the year and you're in the war chapters in Alma. And you get to, what's his name? Not Amalickiah, his brother. Either one of them. And they're dissenters from the Nephites, right? And so you have this huge, multi-week lesson on apostasy.
That's going to be fun.
Yeah, it's not fun. You have these Sunday school lessons, and you have one in the Doctrine and Covenants here about Thomas Marsh, and you have, all of the apostasy lessons in the Old Testament. So, you have a lot of apostasy lessons in Sunday school. James didn't fit into any of them. So I was kind of having to forge my own way of looking at things, because it just did not work otherwise.
So Denise, get us to critical mass for you when you left.
So critical mass for me was I was sick and tired of not talking to James. It was... And
I never gave up. I was very still, even when I was like, okay, I'm okay with this, that would last for about 2 months, and I'd be like, okay, so can we talk about maybe this now? Yeah, and then she would just kind of shut down and get really mad and slam a door and go hit something in the garage for a while, and I was like, I guess not now.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we weren't talking about a lot of things. Not just church stuff, but it was starting to turn into a habit, I'm not talking to him very much about these important things, so I didn't think to mention this important thing that was totally not church related. And I was very much not okay with that. And so I sat myself down one day in April. April is our
April's our magic month for you.
Yeah. So I sat myself down one day and it was like, you are going to figure it out right now. You're going to figure out how to talk about this, because I didn't want to spend the rest of my life that way. I didn't want to spend the rest of my life missing my best friend. And so I gave myself kind of a week to get myself ready for it. And then I cornered you after you got home from work one day, and it's like, you have half an hour.
I can only handle half an hour.
Yeah,
But you get half an hour.
You get half an hour. You pick one thing. Please, for the love of Pete, keep it to under half an hour, and I will try not to lose it. And then you're going to give me like a month. And then you're going to pick another thing, and you have another half an hour. And we're going to start working through until we can talk about this, because I'm not okay with the way this is going.
No, and just like this interview is supposed to be 45 minutes, and we're already a good hour into it.
Neither of us.
I'm not very good at just because I had 3 years of research backed up here, and I was like, okay, here we go, and it was a little bit of a whirlwind, but it was also
3 hours.
It was 3 hours.
It was not a little bit of a whirlwind, and it was not half an hour, because the one thing that he picked was Joseph Smith. Not just one thing Joseph Smith did or taught. It was Joseph Smith.
Like the entire history, yeah.
Yeah, like from age like 14 to death. So
it rocked you a little bit.
What?
It rocked your world a little bit.
It did. I was a wreck at the end. Because like no matter where you end up in the church, if somebody you love is going through a faith crisis and you talk to them about it, you're going to have to learn to see at least a few things differently if you want to understand them.
Your half an hour to 3 hour long chats followed by a month of you kind of sorting things out. That process back and forth ended up leading you away.
Yeah, well,
kind of.
So I was getting a lot more nuanced in how I believed, but it was still kind of working for me. It was getting less and less so. One day, it was Bill. You guys will have to tell Bill for me.
I'll tell Bill.
James told me about Bill Reel's Facebook feed. And so I followed Bill.
Which was actually, I think, it was much more a thoughtful faith at that point.
It was.
Yeah.
This was a couple of years ago, and it was.
Bill's tone has changed a little bit.
Yes, he can.
He's changed quite significantly. I'm not the person to really criticize anyone for changing, so I'm like, props to you, Bill. But it was different then.
Yeah. So Bill was like the only thing keeping me sane. And one day it was right after the November exclusion policy for the kids of gay couples, and like I already had a lot of stuff I was trying to make okay. And then there's the 3 hour Joseph Smith dump.
Oh yeah.
Which was really difficult. And then one day, it was in July, and Bill posted a quote from Richard Bushman saying that the church was going to have to redo the narrative because the current narrative wasn't sustainable because it wasn't true. And that just broke me. I was like, fine. I'm done. Done.
Well, you were teaching the youth at the time, and
I
think
they just called me to be a Sunday school teacher for like the 14 and 15-year-olds, and I had a kid in there whose older brother had just come out as gay. And I was like, I cannot do this.
And so now you're on the same page, and everything's fine, and nothing to worry about, right?
No.
Well, I mean, I don't know. Things are really good.
No, and you can tell that things are really good. So
what are you worried about? Maybe we need to get Hold on, we're going to turn this into a therapy session here. I'm going to figure out what's going on.
So James is an atheist, and I am not. I think if you forced me to put a label on myself, I would say that I am a loosey-goosey, non-literal Christian. I don't know. I don't even know what I would call myself anymore. I believe that we're loved. I believe that there is some form of God, be it he, she, it, or they, and we're loved. And that the Christ I find in the Gospels is worth following. Even if you strip divinity out of it, I would follow that. That's where I landed. As much as I've landed, I still feel kind of like I haven't like stopped yet.
And I don't think we ever should.
Yeah, I mean, I hope not, because so far I haven't. It's been 2.5 years, so you'd think if it was going to happen, it would.
So, Denise, let me ask you this, because this is something that Katie and I can't be the experts on, because it's not our situation. With James being an atheist, what are some of the misconceptions or things about atheism or atheists that maybe you can dispel for us?
I think the first thing that comes to mind is that they're not moral because they don't have somebody making them be moral. is it Penn and Teller who said, it's like I rape and kill exactly as many people as I want to, and that is 0.
Right.
And then if you need a God to tell you not to do those things, then you have other issues.
You have issues, yeah. Atheists are generally very good people. They're charitable and generous and loving and kind because that's how they choose to be, not because they're afraid or because not even out of love for a God that you want to please, but because they choose to be really good humans. I mean, all the atheists I know are fabulous people.
I think it's because in general, people are fabulous people. In general. I mean, Mormons are fabulous people, and atheists are fabulous people, and everyone gets stuck in their own tribal way of thinking and is also closed-minded and self-interested as groups. But I think regardless of how you cross those lines, I would generally rather know and get to know somebody than not.
Yeah. People in general are amazing. And atheists are no exception to that.
In groups, lots of people can be jerks, though.
Yeah,
atheists as well can be very self-righteous.
I mean, start prowling around our atheism.
Yeah.
But another thing would be like your spouse isn't going to go off the deep end because they're atheists. They're not going to turn into raging alcoholics or porn addicts.
But I mean, none of that's to say that switching, like leaving the church, doesn't have its own challenges. I think it
totally does.
A lot of people struggle to adapt the new world. Yeah.
But
it doesn't guarantee
the atheism boogeyman.
Yeah. I don't think it guarantees any specific outcome in life.
No. Well, see, that's the thing. That was the other thing on like my epiphany day where I was like, I'm supposed to be happy. Nobody knows the future. You do not know the future when you walk into the temple and get married. You just don't. And if you're expecting everything, if you expect the person you walk into the temple with to never change, not only is that mistaken, but it's sad.
Yeah.
Your spouse is still the same person they were the day before they told you.
I like that. That's a great message.
So, James, I have a question for you.
Sure.
Is there anything that you've held on to from the church? Like something that you liked that the church taught that you thought, oh, that's something I want to hold on to with my family or my marriage? I don't know if that makes sense.
I mean, I think the very first lesson, the most moving thing I learned when I read the Book of Mormon for the very first time was Denise had asked me to read 3rd Nephi 11, but I was very new to things, and so I read 3rd Nephi 2 instead, which
read it Roman numerals.
I read it as Roman numerals. So this is when God is just like chewing everybody out, and I think it's
3rd Nephi 2 is apocalyptic.
It's apocalyptic. Wow, I wonder why she chose this one. But there was one part in there that hit me hard at the time because I was a different kind of atheist then. I was a little bit smug about things, and there was a scripture that said that the people had become hard in their hearts, and they had learned to not really accept any miracle, and that had struck me hard. And I think to this day, I still remember to be try to be softer and more human than kind of the analytical side of me would be. To reach outside of my hermit log cabin upbringing, and go and talk to people and be, not human's the right word, but I guess less hard-hearted. And so I would say that's the first lesson that I learned from being a member, and probably one of the most enduring ones.
Along with that, I want to just do a callback. We talked a little bit about your parents and how they were vocal about just your choices, and you've kind of gone through this evolution now of yourself. And what are their feelings now when you told them, I'm leaving the church, I'm an atheist? Like what has been their reaction?
I think that they've been nothing but kind of relieved. I think they were always a little bit worried that there was some kind of undue control. It just seemed weird to them that their son would all of a sudden throw his life savings onto a mission to go to Colorado and then not be able to see the Nutcracker, right? And so I think there's a part of them that was just relieved to see, like, oh, okay, we know that he's making his own decisions now, and then that's kind of one of the things that parents want for their kids, is to know that at least they're if not following in their footsteps, at least making the choices that they choose to make instead of having them made by somebody else. And so that made them feel very, I think that made them feel very relieved.
Yeah. Denise, how about for you? What was the experience like with what you want to share about telling your family about your new position?
My family was less than thrilled. I was a very zealous kid.
You were all in too.
Yeah, I was super all in. Like, my family knew that James had been having a lot of trouble with the church. I hadn't told them when I started having trouble with the church. And maybe I should have. I don't know. I didn't want to hurt them. I didn't want to make them worry.
Because everything's still going to be fine.
Yeah, everything's still going to
You
be
still
fine.
have a testimony.
Yeah.
It's still, yeah.
Yeah, I was like, everything's going to be fine. There's no need to worry them. And so when I did tell them, it didn't go spectacularly well. Yeah, it didn't go.
Your sister felt pretty hurt.
Yeah, my sister was pretty upset. I mean, they were all upset. My sister is just a little bit more vocal than the rest of them about being upset.
I mean, they don't treat us badly, and they
No.
haven't tried to reconvert us or anything.
No, they're very respectful of where we're at. I wish, like, as much as I wish that I could talk to James when I was still in and he was out, I wish it was easier to talk to my family about it.
Yeah.
I wish I could make them understand. I don't have any desire to deconvert them. If it's working for them, they're happy and they're safe, I don't care. I wish I could make them understand where I'm at, just because I have kids and I can imagine how disconcerting and scary that would be to have them turn on a dime like that. That would be frightening, and I would like to give them reasons so that they didn't have to feel scared. I don't want them to be scared or worried.
That's a very loving viewpoint, because I think that so much of the time we just think about, how is this affecting me, not how is it affecting those around me. So I really love that viewpoint.
Thank you.
And I don't think you need both people to leave the church to have a healthy marriage.
No, you don't.
And that's one of our greatest worries in sharing these stories is that where Denise eventually chose to go herself, it should in no way invalidate the things that we fought for in a marriage to make it work no matter what happened.
Yeah. Because, I mean, a lot of the groundwork that makes this really good today
is because of that.
It's stuff we fought tooth and nail for during those 2.5 years.
And I would definitely, I wouldn't want anyone to feel that we're coming at this from the perspective of, this is how you make a marriage work. You both leave the church and it's all good. That's not the point at all. In fact, it's so very much not the point.
Yeah. And thank you for saying that, because that's absolutely our motto, our mantra, our slogan, however, our catchphrase, however you want to put it, is there is no prescribed ending that is best for everyone. And that's the point. That's the point. I mean, Denise, you said it earlier of, if it works for your family, oh my goodness, I don't want to be the one to make it not work. Like, no. let it work for them. And in a marriage, if it works that one is in and one is out, or if the one that is out decides to go back in, I mean, James, you talked about having to kill that integrity part of you. And I would imagine that most people would be in the same boat. But if there is, and I know there are people that just say, you know what, I don't believe this is true anymore. I'm gonna do that. Yeah. I'm gonna be the one that stays in. And if it works for them, do it.
And that's the whole idea behind us interviewing couples, is because, as many as people who identify with us, there were going to be so many more that identify with the both of you. And that's the point of all of this, is to say marriages can work and it's going to be hard, but it's doable, and it can be doable in every different stage you're in.
There are going to be points where doable is also terrifying, and it's okay.
Absolutely.
Like, if you are in a spot where your marriage is worth fighting for, then you go and you do those terrifying talks. And it doesn't have to end in any way other than you go off to bed together and snuggle up and go to sleep.
Yeah.
That's the only ending that has to happen.
But I'll always caveat that out in terms of a large audience, right? That.
Well, for some people, it's not going to.
Yeah, I mean, that like
it won't work.
Some marriages don't work, and some of it isn't because of the church. And sometimes people go off the rails. Like it's always hard to be on a mixed faith marriage thing and say it can work, because ultimately every situation is different.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of a strange balance of knowing that everyone's journey is unique and your journey is not as dissimilar as you think, but it is still yours, and you get to live it the way that it does. And I can't promise somebody that it's supposed to turn out a certain way, or that it will if you follow a certain formula. I mean, that was the one of the things that I think gets members of the church into trouble, is assuming that life will turn out a certain way if you just follow the directions.
So maybe I should rephrase that: if you're willing to fight for your marriage,
if you're both willing,
if both of you are willing to fight for it, then those conversations can end with both of you being LDS, or neither of you being LDS, or one of you being LDS, and that's fine. The only way it should end, if you're willing to fight for it and it's healthy, then it should end with you together. That's the only prescribed ending.
I love it, and I think that is the perfect note to end on.
Perfect.
I am awesome.
You're very wonderful. Okay.
I know that we've just, as amazing as it sounds after an hour and a half, just scratched the surface on what you could provide for the people that are listening. Again, so well spoken. We would love to have you either on for a part 2 or for you to record some things that you didn't get into the detail of, have an episode just about atheism and dispelling some things about it, things like that. Would you be up for something like that?
Well, certainly. And if you wanted to do smaller kind of targeted segments too, like 20 minutes on something, or mistakes or anything, we're kind of available whenever. I think we've seen a lot. It's not an unusual state to be in. I think one of the things that was comforting to me as I was leaving out was knowing that I wasn't crazy. The things that I was processing and that were going through our marriage, I wasn't alone in, even if they were still uniquely mine to experience. So, to whatever degree there's something to your listeners that is common, that just needs to be brought out in the open and discussed and talked, and hear somebody else say it, so that you don't have to be the one to drag your spouse through 3 hours, but more that you can, both of you can know that you're not crazy for being believing, and you're not crazy for being unbelieving.
You're not alone.
You're not alone in either case. I would consider that a privilege to be able to be part of that.
Awesome. Well, listeners that are hearing this, on their behalf, thank you. And listeners, if there is anything specifically you would like to hear from James and Denise talk about on a future episode, make sure to email us at marriageonatightrope@gmail.com.
Or you can follow us on Instagram at Marriage on a Tightrope.
Yes, we'd love to get your feedback. I know that we're going to get emails saying how much they love this interview. So Denise and James, thank you so much again.
You're very welcome.